Let's go through some basic concepts. Windows services. They are manage critical functions on your Windows system, like network connectivity, storage, memory, sound, backups, and all kind of things that run in the background. You can find these by starting a program called services.msc. So if you run a program and you type services.msc, and then starts a program that allows you to manage Windows services. So you'll see here, these are services list for Windows. You'll see different options in here. Some are running. You'll see, for example, Apple mobile service here, application information, Bitdefender as a virus scanner. So you can see which kind of services are running with that program. Another program that you can look at is Windows Registry. And that's a database that stores configurational settings like keys and preferences for Windows and other applications. So usually it stores information about the applications themselves, but sometimes malicious applications like virus that want to start up when booting also write into the registry. So it's quite common that a malicious program like a virus writes changes in the registry, in the Windows registry, to try to make it start automatically. And so to see the Windows registry, press the Windows key and type regedit. You'll see registry editor. So that's called regedit. And you'll see that this contains all kind of keys. So you can see for the current user, for example, software, and then specific information stored for that software. So depending on which software, it might store one or more keys, information in this Windows registry editor. Another program that is also quite common is the event viewer. So the event viewer is all about showing logs, so things that happen on the computer. So that could be updates, hardware that fails, changes in the system itself, when someone has tried to log into your computer, crashed logs, and so on. So it can find, it's like a database that's on any Windows system that shows you about applications, so all kind of applications that were installed, about system events like the hardware failing or things like that, and also security related, so like authentication and things like that. So press the Windows key and then type event VWR, so event VWR, and once you open that, it will show you the event viewer program, which lets you view logs. So if you go to Windows logs, you can see, for example, system log, and then see all kind of things that happened here. Now the number, of course, will be different on your system. So here there is more than 12,000 events. That's why it takes a while. So you'll see some information events, some warnings in this case. That's just the system itself. Now you can also look at the security logs. Then you can see that which logins happened on the system. So then you can see if somebody has logged into your system, and includes the date when they did that. So if somebody has physical access to your computer and logs in, you can view when they logged in the event viewer. So in the security logs, you can find that, all kind of logins and when they happened. Now, Windows also contains all kind of information called telemetry. So it contains all kind of data by itself, like crash logs, application specific, and so on. Basically, it records everything you do on Windows. And in that case, there's no special program for that, but the Windows is doing that by itself. And so those are some basic applications, or what, not basic, quite advanced applications that are included with any Windows system. You might want to take a look at so to see if something's going wrong. You can inspect with those applications and see if there's any weird things going on. On any Windows computer, you can either be an administrator, so completely control the computer, or just a standard user. Now, you might think that's a minor difference, but it's actually a huge difference, because an administrator has complete access over the computer. It can install software, delete users in the system, add new users, and do all kinds of things. So any hacker that gets into your computer, they don't want to be a standard user, they want to be an administrator, because then they have complete control over not just your account in the computer, but all of the accounts. So standard user, if a hacker gains access to your standard user account, what they'll try to do is try to become administrator, because then they have more possibilities in your system to get access to other users, to install software, and so on. So they don't want to be just a standard user. So you can change your default to a standard user, and then if your computer gets hacked by any chance, then the hacker can only access that area of the computer, so they may not be able to install new software or to access other user accounts immediately. So you can search for user accounts, and you'll see this: add, edit, or remove other users. Let's close this one. Just search accounts, manage your accounts, and you'll see the type of user that you are. So that should be a standard user and not an administrator. So this guy is obviously not doing it right. Should be a standard user by default and only be an administrator when you're doing administrative tasks. Now on Windows, there's all kinds of sign-in options. So you can sign in by passwords, but also with physical security key, fingerprint options. There's all kinds of options to authenticate. So if you search for sign-in options, you'll have a choice of several options. Now, depending on your computer or which things you have, which hardware you have, you might have some of these options. So password is one of the most common one. If you use a password, then choose a strong password that is really hard to guess. So don't use 1234 or such kind of passwords, or I don't know, a name with a year, or all of those basic passwords, because those passwords, what hackers will do is try every password one by one of commonly used passwords. So you want the passwords that is not commonly used, or you can simply use one of the other methods. Now I don't recommend biometric in general, because it is not something nobody knows. Like, for example, your face, like, okay, multiple people might have seen your face or have a photo of your face. Fingerprints, they can be copied as well. You leave them everywhere. But the security key, physical security key, is another thing. And, well, not everybody has the physical security keys you have. So that is like a hardware product that you can use as alternative to the passwords. Windows has another feature called the user account control. And so that notifies you if something happens in your system. For example, malicious software might try to become administrator, or try to do things that it shouldn't do. For example, install drivers or make changes in the firewall, and so on. So you can set up notifications for that with user account settings. So if you go to change user account settings, you have several levels here. So either it's always notify or never notify. So this is the worst setting. You want this to be set up all the way up, so then whenever something happens in your computer, you get notified of that. So that's the principle of least privilege. So there should not be anything allowed unless it's absolutely necessary for the task. So for example, if we need to do a presentation or something like that, we might not want all those notifications pop up. But by default, we want that to happen. For example, if you by accident start some virus, you want to be notified of what is going on. So by default, you want this to be always on top. Now you can also configure like the password length, the minimum password length, and such kind of settings, or how many times you can try to log in a tool called the local group policy editor. So that might or might not be available in your Windows computer, depending on which Windows you have. So those are some of the programs you can use to set up or to look at account security or identity security. Almost all of the hackers will try to gain access through the network. So you might see something in movies like using some signals on the radio or whatever, but almost all of them will try the network because most devices, Windows devices, are usually connected to the internet. And the internet is like the worldwide network of computers. So basically, anyone can be targeted. Now, on Windows, there are several things you can do to secure your network. So you can take a look at the firewall. Now, that's a built-in application that blocks and unblocks network traffic. So, like you can try to what data can enter your computer and what can't. Now, of course, there's also Windows Defender Firewall is like a software version, but there's also hardware firewalls that you can plug into your network. So we'll just take a look at software firewall, so on the computer itself. So you can start it if you run the computer and type wf.msc. That starts the Windows firewall, so that's wf.msc. So the firewall should be on first of all, so that you can detect if the firewall is on. Then you can set rules in that firewall. So for example, inbound and outbound rules. So you'll see I have a lot of outbound rules here of what is allowed, but no inbound, or also some inbound rules here. There's an option for monitoring. So you'll see that the firewall is on, and it can block things, block incoming traffic as well as outgoing. So this is one of the things you can do. You can enable unused networking devices, so not inside the firewall, but if you go to your control panel and you go to the system and security and then to system, and then you want to go to the device manager, then you might have one or more network devices in there. Now disable any network devices that you don't use, because network devices are ways into your computer. So you only want to have the one enabled that you actually use. Now on many Windows computers, there's a feature to do file sharing. So in the file manager, you can, for example, go to create a new folder, and you can create any folder you want, of course, in Windows. And on Windows, you can share those folders on the network. So that happens quite a lot in office environments. So if you go to properties, there's an option for sharing, and then you can share it over the network. Now that is done using the SMB protocol. Now this is also very useful for in the case that you want to share something on the network, but hackers will try to use it as well. So it's a file sharing network for the network, and what you can do is simply disable it so that that is not a way into your computer. And so, well, a useful feature, you can disable it using PowerShell. Now take some moment to load, and then you can type disable -Windows optional feature -online feature name SMB1 protocol. So if you type that command, it will disable the Windows file sharing, so that you don't actually share files of your computer on the network that a hacker might try to access. So you can just disable that. You can also take a look at the DNS settings. So on Windows, there's a file called that is in the directory c:/windows system32 drivers etc, and then there's a file called hosts. That file, you can set custom internet addresses. So you'll see in this case some example. You can link this internet address to that website. Now that's very useful, but you might want to check that malicious software is not trying to add anything there. So sometimes malicious software does that, and you'd see the network address and some domain names that you might not know. So those are some of the things. One important thing is that you want to prevent remote access to your computer. You don't want somebody installing a program or starting the program by accident that gives them complete access remotely. And Windows allows remote desktop by default. So that's one of the things you want to disable. So if you go to Update and Security, or go to the control panel, and then find Update and Security, or just type remote app and desktop connections, you'll see Windows remote desktop, there's no connections at the moment. Go back and you'll see allow remote access to your computer. So you want that to be disabled, because otherwise if they have your username password, they can just remotely log into your computer and do anything they want to do. So you want to disable that. So disable it. So that's in allow access to your computer. And you can also find it by typing remote desktop. Remote desktop connection is if you want to connect to the computer, and you'll say allow to remote connections from this computer, and then you can enable or disable it. But you want to disable it because you don't want anybody to connect into your computer. On Windows, you can install software in various ways. You could download things directly from the internet, but you're never quite sure if that's a malicious program, if it's a virus, or a real software. So one of the ways that you can prevent that is just using the Windows App Store. So that's if you press WR or Windows Run, you can type Windows MS Store, or just click on the store itself. Search for Windows Store, the Microsoft Store. If you use that, you can install applications from there that are very unlikely to be malicious, because Microsoft manages that store. So you can find all kinds of apps there, and you don't have to go on the internet browser, internet trying to search the apps, but just download them from here, and you have less chance to download a malicious app. Now, you can also enforce that if you want. So if you go to the select apps and features, so just go to the Windows settings and then search for select apps and features. Apps and features, there we go. And then this is the worst setting, because now it allows to install apps from everywhere. So I can go to virus.com and download this program, and it runs immediately. So what you want to do is set it to this Microsoft Store only. Then it can only download from the official Microsoft Store. So this is not the best settings. You want to have setting only download from the Microsoft Store. In that way, it's less likely that you install malicious software. Now, Windows has another defense mechanism included, which is the Windows Defender antivirus. So if you search for Windows Defender, you'll see the Defender firewall, but there's also the antivirus. So if you search for threat protection, you'll see the newer versions of Windows come with antivirus software by default. That allows you to scan, so you can scan the whole system. Now you should do that quite regularly. You can select some scan options, like do you want a quick scan, a full scan? So full scan is better because it scans your whole computer. And the quick scan is basically a bad scan. It just scans very limited. And so make sure that that is online as well, that you are running the antivirus software, because it's included by default, so you might as well run it instead of turn it off. And so those are some of the Windows features or app features that you can use. There is some other things you can do. Many Windows computers get hacked through Office, so you might want to look at limiting your Office permissions. And so those are some of the things you can, of course. Probably you use the browser many times, or it is Edge, Chrome, Firefox, or whatever. Set some security things there as well, like don't run scripts online, like JavaScript and such kind of things, or blocking advertising, because sometimes there's malicious advertising. You can have some protection settings and so on. For the system itself, these are some of the basic settings you can do to prevent hacking on the app level. It's important to don't run random programs from the internet. Now, in this video, I'll show you why. So we're looking at it from the hacker's perspective. Hackers often use dedicated tools and systems. So this is one of such systems, Kali Linux, which is a system that contains all kind of hacking tools. You'll see here, if I open it, many kind of hacking tools. Now, what we'll do is create a malicious program, Windows program, that we can use to take over the system. So we're going to use the terminal here, and we're going to run a command, which is this command. So we use a command line tool called msfnm. We create a Windows executable. This means it should connect to my computer. It's an executable, and we name the program bat.executable. So you'll see inside this tool system, or inside this system for hacking, we use a tool called msvenom, and it's a standard tool that we can use to create a malicious executable. Now, it takes a moment to generate that executable, as you can see here. But once it's running, we have the executable. It will bypass the Windows firewall. It will connect directly to our computer, an outgoing connection. And once it's connected, we can look into the Windows system. So if you use Windows, never run random programs from the internet. Now, I'll show you why. So we're gonna assume that the user on Windows has downloaded this program. So we have a Windows computer here with that program. Now, I said that it will start a listener. So we will start listening for a connection. You'll see listening on our own computer. So that's what I'm going to do. Now I'm going to start listening. So we need to type some more commands as hacker. Now we'll take a moment or so to start this tool. But once the user runs it, we're just waiting for it to run. We will be able to directly snoop into the computer. Now this is going to take a moment to start. This program is quite heavy. Okay. Now we are just initializing it. Now don't worry too much about these hacking commands, because the course is all about Windows security and not about hacking. This is just for demonstration purposes. Okay, we had to type some commands, but now it's listening for a connection. Then the user that downloaded this program bad.exe is just gonna execute it, right? It got it by email or whatever, and it's just gonna run that. And if everything worked right, here we go. We are inside the Windows computer. If we take a look at the files in the computer, you'll see we have bad.exe here. We can now make directories, delete files, and so on. For example, we might want to delete a file, let's say bad.exe, and you'll see it will disappear from the... Okay, in this case we don't have permission yet to modify on the desktop. However, we could snoop around, for example, taking a look in the documents directory. Maybe there's some important documents or whatever hacker is interested to do. And so you never want to run random programs from the internet, because one click can mean your computer is compromised. Your computer is hacked just by one single click on a program. Things you should always do is update your Windows system to the latest version, because many Windows systems have vulnerabilities. Once those vulnerabilities get published online, hackers will try to break into your system using those vulnerabilities. So using those mistakes programmers made, they'll try to gain access into your computer. So you can try to prevent that by updating your Windows system. So if you go to the Start and search for Windows Updates, you'll see there's a Windows Update settings. So you want to make sure that you always run those Windows updates to prevent your computer getting hacked. So here you'll see I last checked it today. You can pause updates, but I don't recommend that at all. You can download and install updates and so on. There's also some advanced options. So you can choose those if you want. But in general, you should always have your system up to date, because Microsoft publishes fixes for those programming mistakes that allow hackers to break into your computer. But if you don't update, your system is vulnerable. On any computer, all the data is stored on the drive or the disk, depending on which term you prefer, but the physical disk. What can happen if your computer gets stolen is that someone just unplugs your disk and reads all the data, or copies all the data of it. Now, that's not something you want to happen. So what you can do is encrypt the disk. In Windows, there's a tool for that called BitLocker that will scramble your disk so that only you can unlock the disk. So Microsoft has that only for the business edition of Windows, so that if the computer gets stolen, the thief cannot start to read your data, copy your files, or do malicious things. And so if you go to Start, Control Panel, then go to System and Security, and you'll see BitLocker here. We can search for it. So in this case, there's no BitLocker on this system. We can search for it. You'll see in this case there's no BitLocker on the system, but on the edition of Windows you can enable it. It has been around from around 2004, and what it does is it scrambles your disk. And so if somebody tries to take out your physical disk, which they can if they steal it, and plug it into their computer, they only have access to the scrambled data. They'll need your actual password, the BitLocker recovery key, to be able to access your data. So you can protect your data that way as well. You also might want to update automatic backups. In case your disks breaks, you want to still have access to your data. And so you can search for enable file backups. Search backup settings, and then you can add a drive and do automatic backups. So either you can upload to the cloud, but I recommend doing physical backups, having 3 backups, maybe 2 at the home and 1 on offsite location. So because online things can go wrong as well. You might not have internet on the time you need your files. If you have 3 backups, 2 one in your home, 1 in your office, and 1 somewhere else, then it's very unlikely that you'll never be able to access your data. So that's the 3-to-1 rule. Whereas online, okay, you might not have internet access or something else goes wrong. Maybe your OneDrive gets hacked. Then you wouldn't be able to access your files anymore. But with physical drives, you have complete control yourself. And so you might want to have at least 3 disks to back up your important files.